And welcome in for another edition of the UMBC Ryan Odom Coaches Report. Gary Stein along with UMBC head men's basketball coach Ryan Odom. We'll talk to Ryan about his basketball team in a moment. A little bit later on, we'll visit with one of his assistant coaches, and he's been with you for quite a while, actually, in a lot of different places. Nate Dixon will stop by, and my broadcast partner, John Feinstein, will wrap it up with him a little bit later on. But first, let's get into some UMBC basketball.
Yes.
It's been a couple weeks since we've been here. Let's go back to the Vermont game at home, the second of two matchups with the University of Vermont. And all of a sudden, UMBC cannot lose to Vermont.
No, I don't know about that.
Well, but you guys have defeated them. You're the only team that's been able to beat them so far in the conference. Take us back to that game, and what was the difference for you guys in that game?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was our defense. You know, the defense was clicking that night. We were able to force some hard shots, for Vermont, and they certainly did that to us as well. So it was a really kind of nasty game in a lot of ways. And, I thought it obviously a great win, for our guys in the program. Vermont, we got so much respect for them. And interestingly enough, I mean, that was the first time that we had played them with Anthony Lamb. As you know, the first game that we played him, he didn't play. And what a player he is, and what a team they have. And, certainly we caught him on a good night, and were able to come out with a win.
I liked your comment in the show before the Vermont game, and Brandon Horvath actually echoed it, saying, look, guys, no matter what happens in the game against Vermont, we're not going to win the championship.
Yeah.
We're not going to lose the championship in this game. This is just a game. Yet at the same time, it was a nationally televised game.
It was.
And it was great exposure for the program. Looking back on it now, was there a little bit more of an edge or, something that's a little bit more important about winning it like that on national TV?
Yeah, no question. I mean, anytime you're able to play on national TV like that on ESPNU, it's a great thing for the program. It's great exposure, for our university. It's great exposure for our players, and the America East as a whole. And I think we represented it extremely well by both teams, and the quality of play, that particular night. And certainly Vermont's had an amazing run here, and certainly the time that I've been at UMBC. And been the gold standard, of our league. And that particular night, it was a great night. It was UMBC's night, and even though it was very tight, throughout, it was in doubt, pretty much the entire game. And those are the kind of games that you want to watch, as a fan.
And then after that, UMBC, and it's always a tough road trip to go to upstate New York and take on Albany, and then on to Stony Brook after that. Let's talk about the Albany game. You had held Vermont to 4 of 24 from three-point distance, and you were one of the better three-point defensive teams in the conference pretty much all season. But Albany made some shots, and they were able to win, I think, by 9, if I'm not mistaken. Talk a little bit about that game and how difficult it was up there.
Yeah, I mean, it was very difficult. We really had a tough time getting our arms around the defensive side of the ball and impacting their ability to make shots. They scored inside, they scored outside, and when you give both up, both sides of it up, chances for a big number are right there. And certainly that was the case. They've got some really, really good shooters, some lights-out shooters, and they've got good size like, Will has always had, at Albany, guys that are tough in and around the rim and really, really guard you well. And they did that night. They did a really good job of forcing hard shots on their end. But then their offense was clicking, and we couldn't really get it switched around.
And that's important because UMBC is going to take on Albany in the first round of the America East Conference Tournament. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's move on to Stony Brook. I thought you guys defended better against Stony Brook, but Stony Brook made some tough three-pointers with hands in their face in that game. So I just think, just watching it, that was some pretty good offense on Stony Brook's part.
Yeah, I mean, they're an explosive team, and that was a big night for them. They knew what they had coming past that, some hard games on the road, and so it was a big game, certainly for them. It was a big game for us as well. And they got off to a lights-out start, on us. And certainly a lot to be learned from both games, for our young team here as we head into the playoffs. You got to play your best basketball at the end. And, I think we got away a little bit from our identity. And that's certainly on the defensive side of the ball this season. And, we've got to get it back, heading into the conference tournament.
And then New Hampshire. Their record doesn't belie how scrappy and physical they
no
are.
doubt.
Any Bill Harrion coach team is going to be that way, and they were. And they took an 18-point lead on you guys with about 12 minutes to go. It was one of the biggest comebacks that I can remember in school history. Talk about the point when they were 18 down. You called a timeout. You're not a particularly big yeller, we know that, and you decided to teach. You brought out the whiteboard and you drew up a play or whatever it was, and you guys were able to make that comeback. Yeah,
but we knew we had to get a bucket on that particular play. You know, we're down 48-30 or whatever it was, you know, at that time. And, you know, I just told the guys, like, you know, I'm not bailing you out right now by yelling at you and getting you all excited. Like, you're going to have to do it yourselves. This is your season, all right? This is your time. And we're either going to step up and play with some passion and make a game of it, or we're not. And, you know, KJ got them together and you know, talked to the team after we, you know, kind of dispersed. Bryce actually did a nice job of, you know, kind of showing his passion to the team as well. And, you know, the players followed. And, you know, that particular night was about trying to find a lineup, you know, that could have some success out there together. And we finally found one kind of right at the end that, you know, was willing to defend like we needed him to, and then offensively was able to score some baskets, because we were really having a hard time there scoring for a while. And offense kind of sputtered. And they just really, to our guys' credit, they picked it up on defense, and they forced hard shots, and you know, they just really chipped away at the lead. And it's not easy to do. I mean, you get down 18 with that amount of time left, you know, typically you're going to lose, and maybe you make a little bit of a game of it, but fouls kind of, you know, take over, and you get a little bit over-aggressive and do some things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do. And to our guys' credit, they played without foul in that entire, you know, segment, and they really didn't get into that bonus until right at the end there, and that was really important for the finish.
A couple more things on that game. Brandon Horvath has been hampered with a hand injury really for the last 10 or 11 games, but you found something in the second half. You went to him repeatedly. Most of the points he scored were actually from the free throw line.
Sure.
You had 13 in the second half, and that seemed to be what your offense needed.
Yeah, no doubt. And we were getting it inside to him, and he was getting fouled on shot fakes and some plays there in and around the basket. They were locking out with some of our shooters, and we had to score near the rim. And Brandon did a nice job of getting fouled. And then, you know, you obviously have to make your free throws at that point, and he did that as well.
And then another Ricky Council type moment. Jose Placer hadn't played for maybe the last 13 minutes of that game because you were looking for that lineup that you needed. And then you bring him off the bench, and he comes in and hits the game-winning three with 2 seconds left, just like Ricky Council did the other night against Albany a couple months, you know, like last month. And another brilliant coaching move.
I don't know about that. But, you know, KJ fouled out, obviously. Right. And so we were in a situation where we had to decide who was going in. And obviously we have a ton of confidence in Jose. He can really shoot the basketball. And, you know, credit to Josh Rosario for pushing the ball up the court. I mean, he was, you know, gave us a huge lift with his energy and defense out there. And obviously, you know, was very key on that last play, you know, driving it up the court, finding Joe, and then Joe now trusting, you know, Jose on that kick out, you know, was a tremendous play for our team.
And talk a little bit about Josh. I looked at the box score, and it's an often unnoticed number, but the plus-minus category, I think he may have been the only guy on the court that had a plus category, and he was plus 17. So he took one shot, made 1 point, and was plus 17.
Yeah, he had a key block, too, around the rim. They rolled a guy down there, and guy had a shot open, and he was the help defender and came over and saved a basket. And we needed every basket saved at that point. And, you know, defensively, we were able to win the game. And the ironic thing about it was, coming off those other 2 games, we going into this one, we said we want to win a game with our defense. And certainly, you know, that was exactly what happened. We were able to stop them on numerous possessions down the stretch. I think they scored 3 points or something like that, you know, or 5, whatever it was, you know, in the last however many minutes, which gave us a chance to win.
And then let's move on to Albany. You've got you guys are locked in as the number 3. They're locked in as the number 6. You've had 2 tough games with them.
Yeah.
You eked out a 1-point win here.
Sure.
Had the 9-point loss up there. Like you say, inside, outside, tough team. Brown is the coach. He finds those kind of players. What are you thinking of as this game approaches?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough game, for both teams, without a doubt. I mean, just because we're home doesn't mean,
Right.
all of a sudden we're going to, win the game. We're going to have to play really well in order to win. We're going to have to play the game at our pace. It's two teams that are pretty good on defense. They've got some guys that can really shoot the basketball, and we've got to make sure that those shots are contested and we limit how many they get off. Because they're excellent. If you let them get shots off, chances are they're going to knock them down. And from a defensive side of the ball as well, we've got to be able to rebound. They're a really good rebounding team. They put a lot of pressure on you at the basket. Mod Clark is really playing well down the stretch here. I know he's brought him off the bench at this point, but he's really a starter. And the freshman has really stepped up, D'Souza, who they inserted into the lineup. Didn't really play much here, but started at Albany when we played up there and had 15 points and played really well. So it'll be a hard-fought game, and we're excited to be able to get out there and play in the playoffs.
Final thought, R.J. Idlerock, your point guard, missed the last couple of games.
Yep.
He hurt his hand in the Albany game, if I'm not mistaken. What are your thoughts on him right now?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're hoping to get him back. We're not sure yet, kind of where he's at this point. We're going to stick him out in practice and kind of see what he can tolerate, similar to Brandon, in his recovery and getting back. But we've had one of those years, unfortunately, where the injuries have kind of taken hold. And, to our guys' credit, they haven't ever used it as an excuse. And they've just found ways, to continue to play good basketball. And so we've got to continue to do that. Hopefully we'll have them. If not, it's next man up. And, we'll play.
Sounds good. We will take a break, actually, and then we'll be back with a guy who seems to be joined at the hip with this guy. Nate Dixon, the assistant coach to Ryan Odom, will join us when the UMBC Ryan Odom basketball report continues right after this. And welcome back to the UMBC Ryan Odom Coaches Report. Gary Stein, along with Ryan Odom, head men's basketball coach at UMBC, and joined by this guy, Assistant Coach Nate Dixon, one of the true good guys in the game. How are you?
Good to be here.
Absolutely. And thank you for all you do for us, by the way, as far as media is concerned.
Appreciate what you guys do.
Absolutely. You guys have a long history. This isn't the first job that you guys have been involved with. I don't mean to say, how did you first meet, because that doesn't sound right. But what was that like when you guys did first meet?
Is that for me or for
That's
Coach?
for you.
That's going to be for you.
Well, the hot seat.
Honestly, I have to go back and Coach, we've talked about this through the years, but I grew up in North Carolina as well, obviously with who his dad is. And, growing up in the ACC country, you kind of know, you grow up watching that. And so you obviously knew who his dad was, and I was fortunate to attend five-star basketball camp. Whose dad, and Ryan was a little kid running around, and as we're just a couple years apart, but it's kind of ironic. In college, I used to before college, went to five-star, knew who his dad was, and who Howard Garfinkel, the late Howard Garfinkel, whose influence on him and his family, and actually had a pretty good influence on me as I got older. But kind of how it came about, and without him knowing this, was I used to work, and I think we've talked about this, Virginia's basketball camp when his dad was there, Jeff Jones, who was one of his former bosses. And so I kind of just traveled, in college because I thought I wanted to coach, but it's so hard to get into it unless you played at a certain level. And I was fortunate to meet a lot of guys that way. And so I kind of knew as a family when I was younger, but then, I think we kind of knew each other, and then it crosses paths because you're in the same profession. There's only at the time when there's only so many jobs.
Right.
I mean, there's, at the time when there's 302, there's like 1,200 or 1,300 jobs in the business in Division I. And, so you kind of look at guys that you are I don't know mentor is the right word because I didn't know him as a good friend then as I do now. He's a mentor, obviously. But you look up to guys and you try to, see he has such a different temperament than I do. And so when I was younger, it kind of came across like, you know what, why is his dad the way he is? And then, as I got to know Lane before him really well, and then I kind of figured it out. So I would say, from the outside in, I knew Ryan before Ryan knew me. Does that make sense?
It does,
so I knew
actually.
Of that group.
Yeah.
So.
And, Coach, I was going to ask you, and you guys started coaching together, if I'm not mistaken, at D2 Lenore Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
and then
no, actually, the first time was Charlotte.
Charlotte was before
Charlotte,
that. So how long have you two been actually coaching together now?
Since Charlotte, I'm trying to figure
right?
out.
7 years, I think.
Yeah.
I think this year's 7.
So my question to you is, do you think alike? Or do you like compliment each other with your thoughts, or do you challenge each other? Like I don't know if I'm saying that right or not.
Yeah,
how do you guys think together?
I think anytime you're in a situation where you're on a staff together, what you want to do as a head coach, at least for me, you want to have folks on your staff that are going to compliment you. You don't want guys that are going to be exactly the same as you. You want guys that are going to challenge you, all right, and help you think. Sometimes, a little bit outside of the box, a little differently than you might be comfortable with. And certainly all these guys, in their own way, challenge me each and every day. And, ultimately as the head coach, you have to, make the final decisions on what happens. But, I feel nothing but supported and loved by the guys that I have on my staff. Obviously, we're talking about Nate right now, but, I remember meeting Nate probably when he was just after he had left maybe Queens. He was coaching at Division II Queens, and they were top notch. I mean, top in the country, at that point. He was working, there for Bart. He was a great coach and is back there now, actually, at Queens. And he left there and went to Stetson and was working at Stetson. And a guy that he worked with named John Kaufman, who's now the coach at Fort Wayne. He and I played against one another in college. And so that was kind of the initial connection. And his head coach was a guy by the name of Derek Waugh, who played at Furman. And I'd visited Furman coming out of high school.
It's amazing.
And he was a great player at Furman. And that was kind of the first time that we met. And you know how it is in coaching circles. You just, you see one another out recruiting, and, you chat with one another while you're sitting there watching a game or whatever, and you stay connected. And, that's kind of how it happened with Nate and I. And then the first time we ever worked on a staff together was at UNC Charlotte. And obviously I got a ton of respect for him. Or else he wouldn't be here right now with me.
No, absolutely. And you guys, when you're not pacing the sideline or doing whatever you need to do as a head coach, when you're actually sitting, you guys sit right next to each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there, and heat of the battle, heat of the game, I totally get all that. But and you guys have known each other for so long. Are there ever any lighter moments, or like a moment where you would just like kind of break the ice a little bit and kind of lighten things up, or does anything like that?
You know what's funny? It's I guess I've done it so long. I think we've been in it the same number of years, 22 or 23 years, and I've worked at different levels, and I've been fortunate that I've worked for 4 first-year head coaches. So I felt like when he was first, he was an interim at Charlotte, but then got the job at LR, and we had worked together at Charlotte. It was unique because I think when I first started and I was working for first-year head coaches, it's a little different. It's a little nerve-wracking, and so I'd done it a few times, and I kind of felt like I was accustomed to maybe what he did or didn't need to hear, and I'm not saying I'm correct all the time, but my point was just not yelling in his ear, or, sometimes hey, I better not say anything, and I better just, let it go. And it's hard sometimes because his mind's churning as a head coach. He's working 2 sides of the ball. He's thinking substitutions. He's got a lot going on, and so sometimes it's nice if the assistants, we're fortunate here. He lets us focus on the whole game, but we kind of have certain areas that we focus on, and it's really unique because he gives us a voice, but at the same time, his voice is the voice, and all we're there is to support and make sure his message gets across to the players, and that's really
right
why we're here.
So if I'm not mistaken, you're pretty much in charge of the scout for the next opponent.
Well, it's funny. We all are a part of it.
Okay.
We all do our portions, and we've had it split up so that way everybody has a say.
Okay.
In how coach does it. So, it's one guy will do personnel, one guy will do the defensive portion of that scout, and the other guy will do offense. And then coach will meet with all of us together, and we all have an opinion on or voice, in it. But it's kind of like you should probably only stay in your lane, because really you need to study your lane and not the other guy's lane, so to speak.
Right.
So it took me a while. I worked for a guy once, and there were specific things that he gave and he would ask all the time about that, and it got me to where I wouldn't even think about the other side of the ball. So working for him, it's kind of neat, because you still get to think about both sides, but you better know what you're doing, and I actually take pride in it. I know our other guys do as well, but I kind of try to put myself in the shoes. Well, what will they run right here? If we're doing this, what are the 2 to 5 or 10 plays they may run when we do this? Or late in the game the other day, against New Hampshire, if he hadn't have asked, I might not have said something, or I might even said, Coach, let me show you a couple things. And usually he'll say to one of us, hey, you got any ideas what they might do here? But it's our job to know that, it's also our job to put him in position to look good, and say, hey, we know what they're going to do. It doesn't mean we're right. But, that's – in scouting, it's kind of a group effort.
Right. So the assistant coaches will prepare the scout for the upcoming opponent, and then what do they do, Coach? Present it to you? Like, how does that then get to you, and what do you do?
We work together on it. I mean, obviously, we all watch individual film of the next opponent, and we watch film of ourselves. How can we improve ourselves? So there's two sides to it. We've got to get our team better. We've got to help our team play the best that they can play. Trying to figure out, what's our identity, what can we do on offense, what are some things that we can do on the defensive side of the ball to move the needle a little bit and help us improve. But then there's also the scouting side where you're focused on the opponent and, how can we, make sure that, our guys understand how we want to guard it. Some of it's just principle based. But then there's also some things where we've got to know, like this could really bother us if we allow this to happen over and over again. And so the players got to have to know that. And, how we get our message across. First off, you got to figure out what those things are. And so we meet, and we watch a lot of film together and we talk about it. And, sometimes different opinions are going around. And then ultimately we've got to settle in on, okay, we're going to do this. This is what we're doing. And then we'll let the chips fall where they may. If we do it right and you do it to the best of your ability and you still don't win, well, we did what we were supposed to do, and we gave ourselves a chance. And, certainly you've got to be able to fix things within the game. I mean, that's what coaching is.
Do, right.
You got to be able to fix things as they're coming at you fast. And what you think going in may not be what actually happens, and you've got to be able to adjust sometimes.
Right.
And that's what coaching, and that's why it's fun.
Right.
That's why we all love it. But I do enjoy having each of these guys on the staff because they all bring something a little bit different in a positive way to the table. And the way we do it is not necessarily the way that a lot of staff and other staffs where Nate has the next scout and nobody else has any other involvement in it other than the head coach. And I like it to where everybody's got, everybody's engaged. And we ask our players to be engaged on every game. I want to make sure that our coaches are engaged on every game. And that way it's a total team effort. And it's not, he's got this scout and then he's thinking about 2 games ahead. We got to focus on the here and the now, and our staff's done a great job of that. I'm talking about the assistant coaches have done a great job in that.
Nate, we probably only have about a minute or so left here, 2 actually. If you're a fan coming to this game, UMBC in Albany, the first round conference tournament game, what are some of the things that, and you've done the scout, and you know the personnel, what are some of the things that the fans should be looking for in this game?
Well, the physicality of Albany, is that's their identity, and they made threes up there. We've had we played a good game here. We were fortunate to win, but at the same time, we went up there and took a punch or 2 early, and that's kind of how they play. They try to enforce their style on you, and we're going to have to step up physical. In the physicality of the game, we're going to have to box out. We're going to have to contest 3-point shots. They made a lot of them early on us up there, and we've got to do some things early to stop those things, and then see how they counterpunch. And that's what we're hoping for. Is we can come in and do the things that we need to do, and step up to the physical part of the game, and then we'll shut them down, and then let's see how they react. And we've got to do that. We can't let them punch first. So, we're hoping that on that side of the ball that we can impose our will. And we've been able to do that some this year. And there's opportunities that we haven't as well, or games that we didn't. So, it's a challenge for us because they're good. They're young. They're getting better as the season's going on. Anyone that looks at it has seen that
they started 0-5 in the conference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And and they're young. They're very young at the guards and young in the post. So now they're starting to figure out their lineups, the sets that work, the actions that work. They want now their physicality of how Coach Brown wants. Things are starting to click a little better for them, and it should. Everybody wants to play better at the end of the year. Yeah. So we're up for the challenge. And I'm sure they'll bring one. So.
Yeah. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be good. Guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Everything you do for us. That's Assistant Coach Nate Dixon. We'll take a timeout here. Our third segment, John Feinstein, my broadcast partner, will join us when we return as the UMBC Ryan Odom Coaches Report continues right after this.
Respect is hard work. Respect is dedication.
Respect is earned on the court or on the field.
Respect doesn't judge based on sexual orientation or gender identity.
Respect is being the first conference to partner with the You Can Play Project.
And the first conference in the LGBT Sports Safe Founders Club.
Respect coaches, players, and the game.
Respect similarities.
Respect differences.
Spread respect.
Spread respect.
Spread respect.
And welcome back to the UMBC Ryan Odom Coaches Report. Gary Stein and head coach Ryan Odom from UMBC. And as we always do in our third segment, joined by my partner in crime on the ESPN broadcasts, John Feinstein. Welcome in, my friend. How are you today?
Gary, Ryan, good to talk to you guys. Looking forward to Saturday.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And John, we've got to start off. Ryan and I were actually just talking about it in the break. We've got to give you credit, okay? And you know how difficult this is for me to do. But for calling basically how that UMBC University of New Hampshire game would end, that was pretty cosmic of you, my friend.
Well, obviously there was a huge element of luck involved in that. I said with about 4 or 5 minutes to go that I thought the game was going to end with someone from UMBC hitting a 3-point shot to win the game. Now, there was a little bit of intelligence involved in that I sensed, and we had been talking about it, obviously, Gary, and Ryan, I know you felt it on the bench too, because we talked after the game, that New Hampshire had lost its momentum. UMBC had turned the game around. They had turned up their defense. And New Hampshire, a team that had only won 4 games, was starting to struggle. And I really felt that UMBC had an excellent chance to win the game. Now, the part about making a 3 was just one of those things. A lot of us believe in the basketball gods, and UMBC hadn't made a 3 since Bill Clinton was president. Or at least it felt that way. They 1 for 20 against Stony Brook, and then I think at that point in the game, 1 for 17 or 1 for 18 on Saturday, and it just felt like the right thing to have happen would be for UMBC to finally make a 3 at the end. And the play was set up perfectly. The ball was in Joe Sherburn's hands, as we thought it would be, Gary. And he got in the lane, saw the double team, and there's Jose Placer wide open. And the Retrievers were just due to make one, and they did with what I think it was 2.4 seconds left. So I was a little bit off. It wasn't at the buzzer. It was with 2.4 left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it certainly was one of the great comebacks. Ryan and I were talking about it. It's one of the greatest that I can remember. I know Ryan's been here. This is his 3rd season. But, Coach, can you describe your emotions when that shot went in? Was it relief? Was it what was it exactly?
Yeah, just excitement, for the guys. Obviously
your emotion, Ryan, was set up the defense.
Yeah, exactly. You're immediately waiting for the horn to go off, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the next play here? And certainly that was to defend it. So we subbed Sam in, put him on the ball, and then began to switch everything. And Brandon made a nice play on the ball there on the last heave down the court. But, just a remarkable ending. You got to give, Josh Rosario a lot of credit for, what he was able to do. Hadn't played a lot this year, and we inserted him in the lineup there with 12 minutes or so to go. And, he made some big plays for us. Not a lot of, stats in the game, but certainly on that last play, his push up the court and the speed at which he did it, after going back and watching it, was key to us even being able to get the shot off, because he pushed it up so fast. Now all of a sudden he had 2 guys on him, kicks it back to Joe. Joe has a little bit of space. Of course, they're going to run at Joe because he can shoot. He gets around, and then Joe's trust, to give it to Jose in that situation, who hadn't been in the game in a while, was really remarkable. That's what a team's all about, and it was fun to see that happen.
John, I thought your comment was interesting. I don't remember exactly when, maybe 8 or 9 minutes to go. They had an 18-point lead with 12 minutes to go, but then UMBC managed to whittle it down to maybe it was single digits, 9 or 10. And you made a comment saying that if you think about it, the pressure is really all on New Hampshire at this point because they're fighting to get into the conference tournament. UMBC is already guaranteed at least one home game. So how does a young team like New Hampshire that lost its leading scorer and leading rebounder of all time coming into the season, do they have enough to hold on to this lead, and ultimately they actually didn't have enough?
Yeah, and again, a lot of it did have to do with the pressure that UNH was under. Their season was on the line if they wanted to play in the conference tournament. A young team, one senior who plays really a lot of minutes, and a lot of freshmen and sophomores, and a team that doesn't know how to win. They'd beaten Albany on Wednesday, but they'd actually beaten them fairly easily. They had not won very many close games during the season, whereas UMBC has been in a whole bunch of close games during the season. And this was the second time, as we all know, that Ryan brought somebody off the bench in the final few seconds who hadn't played for much of the second half and allowed him to take the what turned out to be the winning shot. In the Albany game, it was Ricky Council, and in this game, it was Jose Placer. And that does go to the confidence a coach has in his players, and players having confidence because they know the coach believes in them. But we've all seen a lot of games, and you get to a certain point in a game where you feel like the team that's not supposed to win, which was New Hampshire, who had a big lead, is starting to look over their shoulder. And the example I remember the most, and you'll forgive me for bringing this up as a Duke graduate, but at the 2001 Final Four, Maryland was up 22 on Duke with 5.5 minutes left in the first half. And Mike Krzyzewski called timeout, and I'm looking across the way, and the Maryland fans are literally dancing in the aisles. This is their dream come true. They're in the Final Four, and they're kicking their nemesis's butt in the Final Four. And I turned to George Solomon, the sports editor of the Post, who was sitting next to me, and I said, "You see those people sitting over there dancing right now?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "In about 90 minutes, they're going to be brokenhearted." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Duke's going to win this game." And he said, "They're down 22. And I said, "Yes, they are. But they're not going to go away. They're going to rally. They're going to make this game close. They're too good and too well coached. Like UMBC's too well coached, no, not sucking up, Ryan, but it's true, to just go away." And when Maryland sees them in the rearview mirror because of the team's histories with one another, they're going to fade. And sure enough, Duke ended up winning by 11. Now, UMBC wasn't down 22, but they were down 18 with a lot less time left. But once I think I said to you on the air, Gary, if UMBC gets this in single digits,
yes,
New Hampshire's going to start to feel their footsteps.
That's right.
Obviously they did.
Yeah. Coach, what about what John says? The fact that you guys have been in games like these. You've won a lot of games towards the final minute, even at the buzzer. That experience to draw on in those situations.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think it's definitely a factor. I mean, it's it's not something that you want to make a habit of doing. You don't want to be down a lot and having to come back all the time, especially at the end of a game. Eventually that'll catch up with you. But, certainly we have a young team. We've had, a lot of guys in and out of the lineup, from an injury standpoint. So we've had to insert different guys at different times. And, I think it goes back to at the beginning of the season, we talked about, the strength of our team could be the depth, at some point. Like if we're able to have a winning season and do really well, it could be because of, the depth that we have. And not to say that we have better players or we have better coaches than the other teams. It's just we had numbers, at least to start. And if we allowed it to be a strength, it could be. And I think it's proven true. We wouldn't have been able to sustain, the injuries that we have this year. But, when you get in games like the other night, you got to credit New Hampshire because they had to create that lead, and they did a really good job within the game carrying on the momentum that they had from their win at Albany and playing really well, against us. It was a close game at half, and, our team here at UMBC has been really good coming out of half. This particular game, we were not coming out of halftime, and they took a 10-point lead pretty quickly. And then we started, getting a little bit, we were hurt. Our feelings were hurt probably a little bit during that game. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves down 18 and there was nothing really left to do other than step up and fight. And, to our guys' credit, they did that.
Hey, John, playoffs begin next week, as I'm sure you know. We'll be together for that game. Ryan will be on the opposite side of the court. Handicap, or not even handicap, but just overall conference. I looked at the preseason coaches poll. They seem to get everything pretty much right, except for maybe UMass Lowell was a little bit of a surprise this year.
Right. Lowell was picked last because they lost a great player, but I think they were a better team this year than last year when they were so dependent on one player. And they moved up in the conference standings to be the 5th seed. But I think obviously Vermont has to be the favorite, although I'm sure they would be delighted to not play UMBC again, given what's gone on in the last 3 games, including the 2 this season. But there are only 2 losses in conference. Obviously, were to UMBC until that Hartford game, and I think that really we've seen during the regular season, Gary, that any team in this league, any of the 8 that will play, can compete with anybody else. I'm not saying Maine will walk in to Vermont and beat Vermont, but I think they'll give them a game. And I think this is a tough draw for UMBC. Albany is always a tough out. They're a very good rebounding team. They played a lot better down the stretch. They beat UMBC at Albany, and it took that shot by Ricky Council in Albany at UMBC to get the win in the first game. So that's a tough first-round game. And, of course, if UMBC survives, we'll see who they play in the semis, but I think Ryan will be happy to play anybody if they get there.
Yeah, I think so. And, guys, I think also as I look at all the teams, to me, and we knew Hartford was going to be a difficult team for people because of their size, their experience. All 5 starters basically scoring double digits. They love to hit the three-pointer.
And seniors.
Yeah, right, exactly. And Coach, you know that better than anybody.
Yeah.
2 tough games with Hartford, but they were able to beat UMBC twice this year.
They really were, yeah. The Gal's done a great job, with his team, and their team reminds me a little bit of our team last year. Just they find ways, with their experience and their play at the end of games, to make it happen. And I love their guards, and they've got a good mix of their guards, and then their front court guys can really cause problems. And, they play well from the three-point line, and they're shooting it really well right now down the stretch. But, I agree with John. As you look at our league right now, I would expect to see, I would expect the unexpected, honestly, in this conference tournament because there are a lot of teams playing well, down the stretch here. Stony Brook's, played excellent. They were in a tight game with Vermont at Vermont the other night. You've got several games down the stretch here that will determine kind of where this thing ends up. But, it's going to be hard fought. Whoever gets through our conference is going to be, well positioned.
Do you think the conference is overall better than last year, different than last year? How would you compare year over year?
I think it's more even, this year. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily better than last season because there were a lot of good teams last year. But I will say that it's more even, 1 through 8, like John said. So anything could happen as we go into this tournament.
Right. John, final thoughts on what's about to transpire beginning Saturday?
Well, I'm looking forward to it. This is the best time of year. I think the conference tournaments, especially in the one-bid leagues, are full of great suspense and great drama. And, to get to that Virginia game last year, UMBC had to win at Vermont. a place it had not won in years and years and years, and won an incredibly dramatic game with Jarris Lyles hitting that shot at the buzzer. And I think it'll be just like that again this year. And it's a fun time of year. That's why we talk about March Madness, cliche though it is. And I'm psyched for Saturday. I think it'll be a tough game. I think it'll be a really competitive game, and I hope UMBC continues to play beyond Saturday.
And I agree with you on everything. John, thank you so much. Appreciate you as always.
My pleasure, guys. See you on Saturday.
Yep, see
All right,
you.
John, thanks.
Thank you. That is John Feinstein, my broadcast partner on the ESPN broadcasts of UMBC basketball. Coach, that's about it.
That is it.
I won't see you till Saturday.
I know.
Have a good couple days and good luck on Saturday.
Thank you so much.
First round of the America East Conference Tournament. It'll be Albany at UMBC Saturday from the UMBC Event Center. Game time will be 1 o'clock. For Ryan Odom, for John Feinstein, for Nate Dixon, I'm Gary Stein. Thanking you. We'll see you next time. Oh, and also, actually, this is the last regularly scheduled show, the last regularly scheduled Ryan Odom Coaches Report. We may have a postseason version for you, so keep tuned in on that, and hopefully we'll be able to send that your way. Thanks so much.